I am Tom McCoy, and my passage comes from Dickens' Martin Chuzzlewit, Chapter 4. In this novel, Martin Chuzzlewit the Elder is both ancient and wealthy, and it is a truth universally acknowledged that an elderly man, in possession of good fortune, must be in want of an heir. So, in my chosen scene, Martin's vulture-like relatives congregate, each one hoping for a way into his will. For where there's a will, there's a way. This passage is important for its characterizations, so I now give you the Chuzzlewit family. But when the company arrived, that was the time. When Mr. Pecksniff, rising from his seat at the table's head, with a daughter on either hand, received his guests in the best parlour and motioned them to chairs, with eyes so overflowing, and countenance so damp with gracious perspiration, that he may be said to have been in a kind of moist meekness. And the company, the jealous, stony-hearted, distrustful company, who were all shut up in themselves, and had no faith in anybody, and wouldn't believe anything, and would no more allow themselves to be softened or lulled asleep by the Pecksniffs, than if they had been so many hedgehogs or porcupines. First there was Mr. Spottletoe, who was so bald and had such big whiskers that he seemed to have stopped his hair by the sudden application of some powerful remedy in the very act of falling off his head, and to have fastened it irrevocably on his face. Then there was Mrs. Spottletoe, who, being much too slim for her years, and of a poetical constitution, was accustomed to inform her more intimate friends that the said whiskers were the lodestar of her existence, and who could now, by reason of her strong affection for her Uncle Chuzzlewit, and the shock it gave her to be suspected of testamentary designs upon him, do nothing but cry, except moan. Then there were Anthony Chuzzlewit and his son Jonas, the face of the old man so sharpened by the wariness and cunning of his life, that it seemed to cut him a passage through the crowded room, as he edged away behind the remotest chairs, while the son had so well profited by the precept and example of the father, that he looked a year or two the elder of the twain, as they stood, winking their red eyes side by side, and whispering to each other softly. Then there was the widow of a deceased brother of Mr. Martin Chuzzlewit, who, being almost supernaturally disagreeable, and having a dreary face, and a bony figure, and a masculine voice, was, in right to these qualities, what is commonly called a strong-minded woman, and who, if she could, would have established her claim to the title by shutting up her brother-in-law in a private madhouse until he proved his complete sanity by loving her very much. Then there was a young gentleman, grandnephew of Mr. Martin Chuzzlewit, very dark and very hairy, and apparently born for no particular purpose, but to save looking-glasses the trouble of reflecting more than just the first idea and sketchy notion of the face, which had never been carried out. Then there was a solitary female cousin, who was remarkable for nothing but being very deaf, and living by herself, and always having the toothache. Then there was George Chuzzlewit, a gay bachelor cousin who claimed to be young but had been younger and was inclined to corpulency, and rather overfed himself to that extent indeed that his eyes were strained in their sockets as if with constant surprise, and who had such an obvious disposition to pimples that the bright spots on his cravat, the rich pattern on his waistcoat, and even his glittering trinkets seemed to have broken out upon him, and not to have come into existence comfortably. Last of all, there were present Mr. Chevy Slime and his friend Tig. And it is worthy of remark that although each person present disliked the other, mainly because he or she did belong to the family, they one and all concurred in hating Mr. Tig because he didn't. Such was the pleasant little family circle now assembled in Mr. Pecksniff's best parlour, agreeably prepared to fall foul of Mr. Pecksniff, or anybody else who might venture to say anything whatever upon any subject.